I just knew in my heart of hearts that there was something more to this breast cancer situation, and that it was the result. Still feel very strongly it's the result of a perfect storm of like mold and stress, and whether coming through from childhood, but also through my initiation into motherhood.
Welcome to this episode of the Biology of Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Aimie. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And in this episode, I'm sharing two stories that reveal its connection with nervous system regulation and the biology of trauma. Stories about what happens when we finally see that underlying biology of trauma, the mechanism by which our bodies keep score. You'll hear from Dirci, a mother of twins diagnosed with breast cancer during the COVID pandemic. And you'll hear from Melanie, who developed breast cancer after years of postpartum anxiety that she couldn't name or heal. Today, both women are thriving, and I want to show you what they did. They are both now helping others, and they will tell you the same thing. Addressing the underlying nervous system regulation wasn't just part of their cancer recovery. It was essential to it. Let's dive in.
My name is Dirci, and I was born in Brazil. My parents were well educated. My dad was a professor in mathematics. My mom was an elementary teacher, and together they raised 7 kids. So I went to dental school and became a dentist. And after that, through dentistry, I met my husband. So my husband is Egyptian, and he was already established in the US. Years later, we got married, and I moved to the US. That was in 2008. So today, we live in California, and we are raising 3 young kids. Adam is 8 years old, and my twin girls are 6. So after that, I was here by myself, meaning I did not have my family, my Brazilian family together, because I relocated to the US. So the same way my husband was not originally from here. He was born in Egypt. I felt like I needed more support raising 3 young kids. And when I reached out to my sisters in conversation with one of them to see if she could help me and come to the US to help me with the kids, especially around when my girls were 15 months old, I was getting concerned about their development, especially speech. My sister was making plans to come. And that's when a tragedy happened. And when she was about to travel, I got a call that she had passed. My first shock, and to go through the news, that unexpected death, somebody that was coming to visit me and stay here to help my family. It was a very needed time to be with her emotionally and to get the support. And she was very looking forward to be here and meeting the girls for the first time. So that didn't happen. And life continued, and I had to find other ways. I tried many ways, like to get support, and still it felt like it was not enough for the amount of work that was needed, to do anything, even to do a simple outing to the park. I needed a lot of help with 3 kids. A few months later, when we got to the 2-year wellness visit, I took my twins to see their pediatrician. And then their pediatrician referred them to the local San Andreas County so they could get help with speech therapy, with the therapists that would come to my home and stay with them every day for a few hours. So that was my first, the more intentional support, I would say, that I started receiving for my girl on a daily basis. But it came with a cost, because getting new people to my home, the people that I didn't know, I didn't have any connection with them. And it's a different feeling. We feel exposed because there were so many new faces coming in the house, and not everybody connected well with the kids. So I went through a very difficult phase when I was still grieving for the passing of my sister, and also going through the process of trying to help my kids. Now that I know a little bit about trauma, I can see those little elements, pieces happening. So it was a combination of too much too fast and too little for too long. It was very stressful having daily sessions at home with the therapist coming, even though they had good intentions to play with my twins, but the way, looking back, the things that I see now, I have different eyes now. I would not let it happen again if I could go back to it, restart it all over again. So a lot of tantrums, my twins, one of them especially used to hold her breath to the point she would pass out. So very stressful moments and a lot of nose bleedings, and they would cry to the point that burst their nostrils. And we would have to deal with bleeding, severe bleeding, almost every day, and it was very stressful. But I was trying to be brave and hold myself together and go through it and not give up and be maybe not good enough for my kids. I thought that I would have to go through this process and stay there for their best interest, their development. And that was what I was guided and referred to get this kind of help. But still looking back and knowing what I know now, what happened to me later, because then 2 years later, when all this started, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was right when the pandemic started. We were already in lockdown, and I just went for an annual screening. I was not having any worry about it, no lump in my breast, and I just went to a routine mammogram when they saw an image that needed to be biopsied, which later came back positive for breast cancer. Stage 1, so I caught it early, and I had to see a team of doctors for my cancer care, and I went through the treatment. So it's another element, right, to digest and go through it. I was still going through the therapies with my kids, and we were at the pandemic time. It feels like, looking back, I was already in lockdown since 2 years before the pandemic started, because that's when their therapy started, and I had to be present at home with them. I could not go to work anymore. So I changed my work to a more remote role in the dental office, supporting my husband, who is also a dentist. And I was basically at home with the twins, and my older son had his life. He was going to school and so on. That was fine. But I was home since 2018. And then 2020, with the pandemic, the only difference, I had to put a mask on, and everybody else was locked down with me. That's how it felt. So the therapies continued, and life was kind of the same until I got my breast cancer.
Real quick, I want to jump in here and highlight an aspect of Dirci's story that is really important for you to hear. It went by fast, so it might have been easy to miss, but she said that she thought she was being brave by pushing through, that she had to stay strong for her kids. That's resilience that comes at a cost, because underneath, she had a biology of trauma. When her oncologist told her to go back to life as normal, do anything you want, something inside her knew that wasn't right, because normal was what had made her sick. We are going to hear from Melanie and her story of what she did to go through breast cancer treatment with peace. But first, we are going to hear how Dirci found and created a different path for herself coming out of this experience, a path that would change her entire relationship with herself, her body, and with her children. Here's Dirci.
So I had to do surgery. It was very traumatic for any woman. That would be to have both breasts removed. I was at a state that, okay, I want to be radical. I cannot take the chance to be conservative. But when I did the assessment, I felt like the way my life was at that moment, I would have just to minimize future work or risks I would have to do, even to take care of my breasts. So back then, I felt like removing the breast would be the simple way to doing it. So after the surgery, I started chemotherapy. And then after chemotherapy, I had another surgery for the reconstructive part of the breast. So it took about close to 1 year, the whole process. And that's when I visit my oncologist for follow-ups. And he said, you are doing great. That's it. You are all set. You can go home, go back to your older life, back to everything you used to do. You can do everything. You can exercise, you can eat everything you want. And I started asking him, everything, but don't I need to make changes like lifestyle? He said, no, take advantage. Now you are free. Go back and do everything you want. But for me, deep inside, it was not the right thing for me. I knew that the way my life was happening was what put me into cancer. So I needed to find help. And I started looking into cancer communities. Since we were during pandemic time, I did everything remotely. I also joined some of the Facebook support groups for women going through breast cancer. And I just noticed in my body that it was not helping me. Because even if they tell us, oh, okay, lifestyle changes, go walk every day for 30 minutes. Even if I wanted doing that, I could do it for a week, but I was not keeping up. And I was feeling very exhausted, no energy. I was still recovering from the chemotherapy and still in that life at home for 4 years, just trying to help my two girls with their therapies. I had no energy. I was feeling exhausted. And I was absorbing the information from those communities. You can do this, you can do that. But I did not find an answer or that help that I really needed to take me from that place where I was to another place where I could actually take actions and not leave it as information alone, but actually start to take actions, to do the work for myself. So cancer teaches a lot. I learned from that journey that I needed to look at myself now. So I know that I put my two girls at the top priority list for all this time, but this is the result now for them and for myself. I needed to make a change, a shift. And that has to start with myself. Before I put myself on hold, 100% dedication for the kids and the family. But now I needed to make a change and bring back myself to the top of the list. So talking about the cancer communities, there is fear there, the fear of recurrence. And that's when I noticed I don't want to be in that place. That's not a good place. I could feel it in my body. And they were good, though, a place to go get resources. And if I had a question to other women that went through this process, but still listening from their stories, their traumas, their fear was also tricky because they would share those things, those stories, and that would also trigger many reactions in my body. It didn't feel like it was the answer until I saw Dr. Aimie being interviewed by Beth O'Hare, and she was defining trauma. Until then, I had no idea. Didn't cross my mind. Trauma, am I traumatized? Do I have storage trauma in my body? For me, it was just life, what I was going through, and I needed to be brave. I was surviving, and I am brave. I listened to her interview, and I clicked it. I had so many aha moments listening to her explanations, and she's a great teacher, right? And she puts simple words into very complicated subjects to explain it and make it easy for us to understand. So luckily, the 21-day journey was about to start. Maybe the next day or 2 days after I watched her interview. And during the interview, I already clicked in the link, and I was so curious to learn more. And because I could tell, wow, a lot of things happened in the past years. And it was too much, too fast. diagnoses and one on top of the other. And then the therapies, that those small daily doses of stress coming in my house and watching my girls going through their own stress caused by the therapy, actually. So too little for too long. So many heart shocks along the way. I got sick. And for a cancer patient, we want to know what happened. Why did I get my cancer? My medical tests did not really answer that question. I didn't carry the BRCA1, BRCA2 mutation. No. I also checked the other 50 genetic mutations linked to other kinds of cancers, and they all came back negative. I know I have family history of cancer. I really want to blame on my genes, but the tests were coming back all negative. So it was something else happening in my environment, in my life, that were changing the way my genes were expressing. So that's when the true change began with the 21-day journey. I started having awareness of what was going on. I could experience it in my body, because before that, I was more in my mind. I was just pushing myself beyond my limits. I remember the days where it felt like I didn't have enough hours in the days, and I even had thoughts like, why did God make only 24 hours for each day? I needed more. So that was the feeling inside me. It was never done, never good enough. I could never accomplish a task. With the journey, it helped me noticing the environment. I started orienting myself and slowing down when I was doing the tasks. So that helped me even breathe better. My breathing was super shallow. And I started noticing people's face. I was so shut down that I would go to places to buy groceries and I would just stare at the environment, at the shelves. I would not really interact that much with people. I was always in a hurry because I had to go back home and check the girls. I felt every time I left home, I felt like that withdrawal. I had to go back and stay with the girls. So everything had to be done very quickly and fast and be efficient. But I was losing out the social connection, the joy, because even to thinking about going to the park, which the kids love it, but it was such a big task for me. How can I keep them safe? Who is going to help me? With twins, my twins were never together. They were always running to separate directions, opposite directions. So who am I going to save first, this or that? So I went through all the 21-day journey. And after I finished my first journey, I started using the week 1 exercise more often. And that by itself helped me, because that week I was basically orienting myself back into the world. And because I've been in lockdown for so long, I needed to get out of my box and orient myself out finally, which it happened actually, even though we were during a pandemic. But I started noticing that I could slow down and take a moment, if it's just 1 minute, to look around and not only look at my kids, but look around. Look at the trees, look at the sky, and look at myself. So I started mirroring at me as well. So how can I help you? So I started seeing myself. And then I started picking some of the things from week 2 to give me support. I joined another 21-day journey, and I noticed that my capacity had increased from the first journey to the second. Of course, I was reviewing everything all over again, but also I could do more, and I was able to help my body, supporting my body, and bring more of the week 2 exercises to action. So I was more conscious to, okay, let's bring a pillow behind my back, let's hug, let's do more connection with my body. I also started taking some of the coach sessions, the private sessions with Dr. Aimie's team, and I started addressing the biology piece, which was great because then I look into my brain. How can I support my brain? How can I help decrease the inflammation in the brain and in the body? And since the first 21-day journey, I took all the modules of the biology of trauma that Dr. Aimie offered, because then I wanted to really expand and help myself at a deeper level. And I want to learn. I was so curious, and she's a great teacher. So I just kept going. And from there, more awareness happened, and I could do little by little baby steps. But at the end, people started noticing the change, actually. And especially those people that did not meet me for a long time, and they saw me again and they were surprised. Wow, you went through cancer treatment just recently, but great, you look like better than before. Yes, that's because I was really changing the focus towards me, and I was being intentional to help me and to learn how to get inside me and find the cure inside me, that healing power inside me. And I don't want to have fear. I just want to support my body. I would rather be working towards finding a path to feel joy and feel alive, what Dr. Aimie calls calm aliveness, than to take a path offered by other communities that brings along the fear and that you have to do this because otherwise you can get a recurrence, and then you will stay in your mind. We talk about numbers and life expectancy in 5 years, 10 years, or things like this. The conversations, the talk in the cancer community is totally different than the talk in the trauma community. She calls it trauma healing. There is the word trauma there, and that can even push some people away. But actually, there is life behind it, right? And you want to get to live well and fully with the good stuff, with joy, with happiness. That's what she is guiding us towards, to that place. So that's the reason I felt connected to her work and to her proposal, and I could feel it when I took the 21-day journey. I can also tell the difference, the way it feels in the body when I take her journey compared to rather than taking another cancer community support group or journey. It's totally different. I want to go on a journey that talks about life and joy. So that's my analysis of being to both places and choosing the one that make me feel safer and better supported to continue my healing journey. I continued with the biology of trauma community, and I did a 21-day journey. During this year, I took the mentor training program. And today, as part of my cancer healing journey, I'm now helping others because I know this is powerful to keep you healthy and cancer-free. I can see good things happening on my kids now at a faster pace. When I started looking at myself, taking care of myself, I found that my kids also were improving. Very interesting, that co-regulation piece. And learning how to self-regulate was also helping them. I was becoming a better model for themselves as well. And all these trainings I took with Dr. Aimie were not really those parent training programs that I took some in the past. And they didn't seem to help me in real life when I was trying to take actions, to apply what I was learning in real life. But interesting, when I started doing the trauma work with Dr. Aimie, I find that I was actually parenting my kids better. And I could see their struggles better because of the awareness that was created in myself. I could recognize that when they were also going into sympathetic or shutdown state. I had that awareness and the sympathy, and the knowledge helped me. Let's take baby steps. Let's be gentle. Let's see how I can support this kid. It's a completely different approach than trying to change their behaviors. It's just to look at them as human beings first. At this moment that is shifting their nervous system to go to this place and this state. So what do I need to do now? Because I practice on myself now, I can try to help my kids from a total different starting point. Yeah, that's a transformation.
We are going to hear next how Melanie shared how she went through cancer treatment with peace when she would have been one to be in fear. And I want to acknowledge first an aspect of Dirci's story that is important for you to hear. Dirci moved from feeling like she had never had enough hours in the day to actually feeling present. And that's so much of the healing journey, being more present in our life. It's a question I'd like to ask those coming through my courses. In what area of your life would you like to be more present? Would you like to be more present to yourself, your spouse, your children, grandchildren? What about to joy, to pleasure? In what area of your life would you like to be more present? And then we apply the biology of trauma framework to see what is the underlying reason holding us back from being more present. And that gives us the specific repair tools to apply. So we can actually accelerate the healing journey because we can be more intentional, deliberate, and strategic on the leverage points that open doors for us. Next, you'll hear from Melanie, another mother whose story shows how attachment trauma showed up in her own postpartum rage and anxiety and eventually breast cancer. Her path to healing reveals something essential that let's get into her story right now.
My name is Melanie, and I am in Berkeley, California. I am a mental health practitioner, psychospiritual counselor, and I am a mother of a wonderful 10-year-old daughter. And I have a partner who is a lovely man and a high school teacher. It all started for me when I became a new mother. I had a pretty traumatic transition into motherhood. There was a lot of anxiety. I didn't even know postpartum anxiety was a thing, but I had it, and I had it a lot. And we were in a moldy apartment and I didn't know it. So I think my husband was maybe going through grad school at the time and becoming a teacher. And we were in the outskirts of San Francisco, and I was so isolated. And I had a lot of rage, which is not something you hear a lot about with the new mothers. It feels pretty taboo, actually, even to say it now, that I was like an angry new mom. I was completely loving to my daughter. There was no issue there. It was just the having to tend to her every need when I felt like falling apart was just really brutal. And I have a lot of hypervigilance as a result of a difficult childhood that many of us have experienced. And so I think the hypervigilance added with having to watch your child take care of their every need. And now we don't live in communities where grandma can come over or auntie can come over or any of that. I just did what I always did before that, which was push through and push through. And so I continued to try to push through, and I did. I think a lot of people would have maybe ended up in complete depression, but it didn't feel like an off. And so the pushing through actually led me to feel really angry. And so there was a lot of rage. And so a lot of tantrums, almost mommy tantrums with my partner. Some of the trauma that led up to this sort of perfect storm when I was a new mother involved my father was an alcoholic, and so my mom, and he wasn't helping very much as a parent, so my mother left him, and we ended up later on, she was in a relationship with a man who was a rageaholic, and he did not really like my brother and I very much. I have an older brother, he's 6 years older than me, and my brother, God love him, tried to please this man all the time, tried to be the best kid, and my response was more to be more of a invisible, be the wallpaper, not meek at all, just calculated, like careful. Again, the hypervigilance. And so when I can have my back against the wall looking out, even now I'm starting to work on this, but having to have my back to the wall when I'm at a restaurant or something like that, I just wanted to keep my eyes on everything and everyone. And so there was some physical violence between my mother and her then boyfriend. And as a result, a lot of hypervigilance and a lot of protector. I have this protector energy that just swoops in. And so when my baby was born, it was like, oh, that protector mechanism kept coming in pretty strongly. And so even though my husband wasn't a threat at all, I mean, he's like the least threatening human being of all time, my nervous system was just experiencing him as a threat. It's like the whole thing was just subconsciously playing out. And this was before I was a practitioner. So I had no awareness of patterns and parts and all the things that our psyche is trying to do to keep us safe. When I became a new mother, anxiety had already been a very old acquaintance with me. We've been going hand in hand for a long time. And when my daughter was born, it looked like just the constant hypervigilance of, oh, she needs to be fed here. She also didn't sleep. And now I know, because we were in a mold environment, she didn't sleep well at all. And so I wasn't sleeping. And that is just torture. I think it is actually a form of torture to keep people awake. And that really just kept me in fight or flight constantly. I don't think there was a day or a moment where I wasn't in fight or flight, whether I was just like trying to make sure that I was a good, attentive mother. But for me, what it really felt like, it was everything. It was everything. I even had a hard time nursing. If she would get really fussy and upset, the milk wouldn't let down. It was just like, even something that so many people get so much pleasure out of was hell. And it took me about 2 months to be able to get into the groove, and as she got older and everything, to be able to do that and not be in utter emotional agony and also physical agony. And that was another thing. There was a lot of PTSD at play there. So the being touched all the time, the nursing was a big deal. Like all of that, having my body had just helped this child into the world, like all of these traumas were reawakened, and I had no awareness and no way of integrating or any of that. Some of the coping mechanisms that I used were, of course, unhealthy, again, because at that point I hadn't received care and there was no therapy or anything. So I was just flying solo over here. And I would, when we got together with our friends, we were one of the first couples to have a child. I was having a really hard time transitioning out of, my husband had been in a band before he was a teacher. And so we had friends that went out and we drank and we had fun and we did all these things. And I was having a hard time transitioning out of that. And so on the weekends, sometimes we get together and I might have maybe a little bit extra glass of wine. And that was how I would try to self-soothe with the anxiety. And I've worked on this, but there was a lot of shame around that because I was a nursing mother. And so the baby gets affected through my unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think I just pushed harder and harder and harder. And sometimes I just couldn't even stand to hold her anymore because she really required a lot of, she loved to be in my arms and mostly only my arms and not carriers and not strollers and not the car seat. I always joked, it was just like, she just wants to be back inside. I would have to put her down and walk away, even though she was upset, which not great for her nervous system, but I just couldn't have her in my arms anymore. I just couldn't do it. And so that was like a coping mechanism, was to do that and walk away for 5 seconds. It's all I could handle, really. And then come back and get her. But there was just a lot of loneliness. The only coping mechanism I may have used was like maybe the alcohol, like I had mentioned, and probably a little bit of food, but not much. And then like maybe TV, just distractions. I ended up with breast cancer. Gabor Mate, his book about all these different illnesses and how they lead, I am classic breast cancer. So some of the health issues that I had around that time or before that time included, I had chronic urinary tract infections, and then I would take the antibiotics, and then I would get yeast infections, and this cycle just went on and on until they discovered I actually had interstitial cystitis, and I caught it early enough, thankfully, and it was, the medicine helped with that. But that was all stuff I was dealing with in my 30s. And then we entered this apartment when my child was in utero, and it was a moldy apartment and we didn't know it. And yeah, then she was born into that. And when she was born, she was like thrush and all of that stuff. Food sensitivities like crazy. We couldn't heal the thrush in her mouth until I had to take out everything except for chicken and like vegetables, but I wasn't ever sure which vegetables. So mostly I was just eating protein because I didn't know what else to do. And that seemed to help clear the thrush from her mouth, but that was very intense. And so I got very skinny and I lost a ton of weight, and people looked a little concerned. I also wasn't sleeping, so I didn't look great. But that's really the main health stuff that was going on at the time. I also had like a chronic sort of yeast and pinworms situation that I could not get rid of. And that lasted for 2 months. And that really amped up the anxiety. because then I had to clean everything every day. Thankfully, we live right next to a laundromat. And I was there every day cleaning the bedding and whatever. And the women that worked there would be like, why are you here every day? I think they thought I had OCD. And that just really amplified everything to a crazy degree. And the rage really shot through the roof at that point. I remember my mother-in-law came to town, and she's such a delightful, lovely woman. But I was so anxious and so uptight. And, that when the PTSD kicks in and the narrow vision really kicks in, like, you can only see everything that's wrong. I don't know. That's what happens for me. And that's what I was doing. And she got so exasperated. My beautiful, lovely, patient mother-in-law got so exasperated that she yelled out, I've never met anyone like you before. And she has apologized. We've made up and everything. But I now know she's never met anyone as traumatized as me. And that's true. I know most of her life. So yeah, it just all came to a head and was not good. Regarding the anger and the rage piece that I had, that was such a staple in my early motherhood years. I know there's this idea that you can get addicted to emotions, and I certainly see it in clients as well. And as a child, there was so much that was distressing that I was so powerless and could say nothing. I couldn't say anything, or else I would get hurt, or somebody else would get hurt, or whether emotionally or physically or whatever. That I remember when I was 15, I'm going to say all the things and I'm not going to hold any of this in. And so I did that. And then, which worked out pretty great. That was relief to my body. But then when I had a child, the rage really crept up, and I wasn't going to hold it, because remember, I trained myself like, no, you don't hold these things. It's not helpful. But I do think I noticed that a lot of my anger, and this actually wasn't necessarily something I only noticed, it was what my practitioner had told me, my depth hypnosis practitioner had told me. We discovered in a session when I did work later on that I use anger as a way to stop everything, stop the stress. So if my daughter's yelling or whatever, I'd be like, and I'd yell a little bit louder than that, just to stop, just like, it's like a pause button almost. That's how I used my anger. And I think I did become addicted to that, because it was like, not addicted to the feeling of power that it gave me, because it brought me a great deal of shame, is really what it brought me. But it did allow me to have control over my environment, which unfortunately was also my husband and my daughter. And so I personally was using it as a release, but also a relief from continued stressors that might be at play with the people in my environment, particularly my daughter and my husband. So what first shifted the rage piece was scary to me, because I never wanted to harm the people in my life. I knew what it felt like to be harmed in that way, through criticism and just outbursts. And I never wanted to do that to the people in my life. So I felt a lot of shame and guilt around just acting out in ways that had harmed me when I was a child. And so I knew I had to get help. And so I reached out, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I need a hypnotist. I used to say to myself, to my partner, I just need a lobotomy. Like, I just need a part of my brain to be removed so that I can just be okay. And that got me thinking like, oh, maybe like hypnotherapy would be helpful. And so I went and looked on trusty Yelp, and I found a depth hypnosis practitioner, which I was like, I don't know what that means. But a depth hypnosis practitioner is somebody who it's psychospiritual counseling, really. So it involves spiritual element as well as the mental emotional piece. And she was amazing. And she helped me really, really tend to the parts of myself that were still hurting from childhood, and take some of the relief and the release out of that. And it does this a lot through what it is like a guided imagery kind of situation. So it goes beyond the subconscious mind, which is amazing, right? Because that's where all the work really is. And so that was super, super helpful. It was not, however, the last thing I needed to do in order to really learn to soothe my nervous system. After doing a lot of work with the depth hypnosis practitioner, that was amazing. And then we moved from that apartment in San Francisco, a moldy apartment in San Francisco, to a bright, beautiful home in Berkeley, California. There's so much more sunshine here. It just was very helpful and very family oriented. So that helped soothe some of the loneliness that I was experiencing back in San Francisco. And then my daughter got older. As she got older, she was a beautiful teacher for, oh, this is how emotions work. When I had to tend to her, I had to teach her to tend to her emotions, which was a beautiful classroom for me to really learn to manage mine. Because frankly, I'm a first generation conscious parent in my family. I continue to use the tools of depth hypnosis. And so I continued to use the tools that I learned in depth hypnosis. And then I became a practitioner of that modality because it was so powerful for me. And I'm still doing that today. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that today and help other people and help other mamas, which is just like a full circle, amazing, just an amazing gift to be able to do that. But I needed some somatic stuff. I knew that there was stuff trapped in the body. I read enough of the books and The Body Keeps the Score and all that. And I knew that there was just another element. And so I went online and was looking up how to heal your nervous system and somatic. And then Dr. Aimie popped up and the 21-day journey to calm aliveness. And I was like, oh, calm aliveness. That sounds really nice. Let's do that. So I signed up for her course and I took that course and got so much out of it. I was telling everyone, all of my clients, you need to go take this course. You need to go take this course because we live in these bodies and we don't even consider them so often. And they're like lashing out and yelling out like, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And it's funny, one of the things that happened to me in the courses, I realized I don't have one comfortable chair in my entire house. I never thought about how my back feels about this situation or my feet or any of this. And so and a lot of that's by design, right? We live in a society that tries to separate us from our bodies, right? So that we buy things. But damn it, I still never even bought a comfort chair. So it was just really healing and helpful to do. And of course, then I went on to do all parts of me. With the parts work there was really helpful. And I do that in depth hypnosis as well. So I have a familiarity with that. But the tools that I most use now and that I am always using with clients and was just talking to a client about this morning is the heart hold. And so the heart hold and orienting are my two go-tos. And then every day as needed, less so now, which is amazing. That's actually a good sign I'm realizing. But also every night before we go to bed, my daughter and I do the VU, and we do the different versions of the VU. I don't know what Dr. Aimie calls the one with the cat, whatever, cat hands or whatever, but we call it lion VU in our house. And that has been amazing. That's been so amazing. These tools, again, I tell them to everyone who will listen to me because they have just really helped ground the work that I was able to do in depth hypnosis and also help tend to my body and my nervous system in a real tangible way. I need to speak on one thing in the past because I'm realizing it's important. So one of the things that brought me to Dr. Aimie's courses was also that I was going through breast cancer at the time. And, I had done so much spiritual work and so much nutritional work, and all of these elements were all in place. And I had a beautiful care team and all of that was going on for me. And I just knew in my heart of hearts that there was something more to this breast cancer situation and that it was the result. Still feel very strongly it's the result of a perfect storm of like mold and stress, and whether coming through from childhood, but also through my initiation into motherhood, which didn't go as I had hoped or planned. I can't tell you how important it was to have that course and have that support on the daily basis during the 21-day journey course, but also afterward. It was such a supportive environment that people are so kind. And I always loved seeing, as the therapist in me, as a counselor in me, I love seeing people in the beginning when their cameras were off and they didn't feel comfortable, their nervous systems were still too unsettled to be seen. And then they would click their camera on at the end. And it was just so amazing to see that transformation. And our mirror neurons are going off all the time, right? And so I'm watching these people show up for the group and for themselves. And that was just really helpful and healing to me in life in general, and would be for anyone, but especially during breast cancer, because you can get really it can, especially breast cancer during COVID, it's a little bit of a stressful thing, but understatement. But going through it and having these tools was epic. Like I could not have imagined remaining so calm and centered and grounded. And I really did not have, and it was a long process because of all the trust issues I had from my childhood and just maybe part of who my personality, what my personality is anyway. I really struggled to trust that the Western medicine model was going to take care of me because it already hadn't in so many ways. It had in some ways, but it hadn't in a lot of ways. And it took a year before I actually moved on the treatment program. And I was just doing like naturopathic and functional medicine and just doing that to keep it all at bay. And this program was really helpful. I think before the program, I had actually chosen my team and everything. So I'd figured that trust piece out, not figured it out. I had moved toward it, but this really helped a great deal. It's like I chose my team or whatever, but there's moments of doubt throughout the whole process. And being able to like anywhere, I'm laying on a radiation table and I can, before they start doing the work, I can put my hand over my heart right there. And it was so incredibly grounding to have that tool at my disposal and to know that if I was starting to feel panicked or whatever, I could just look around the room. And at one point I had to go in for a biopsy and I was doing so much work. I was also doing Qigong at the time. And so I was doing so much work that I felt okay. I was like, it's all right. It's going to be fine. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I was so open and playful and kind and tender because my nervous system was in a good place that I had to go in for the other breast biopsy later on. And the doctor was like, oh, I saw it was your name on the list. And I was so happy that it was going to be you. And like, I was just me and just in such a, like an open creative space and connecting space because my nervous system was just being tended to. And even at this moment where it would throw a lot of people into a tizzy, it was actually one of my favorite moments through the whole cancer journey, which thankfully I am out of now. But that was like 2 years of my life. And that was one of my favorite moments because I actually was so focused on connecting with her and the technician. And it was just great. And I could never have done that if I didn't have these tools. Something I've noticed personally is that as I go about all these different modalities, and I'm one of those people who will try like all of the things, that they tend to wear out. They tend to lose their oomph. And so I have to figure out and move on to the next thing. I don't know if that's my personality or not, but with these tools that I learned from 21 Day Journey and all parts of me, they're still relevant today. Like they're still relevant. They continue to be relevant and they don't wear out. They're not that kind of a tool. It doesn't take a ton of effort. At least it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't take a ton of like heavy lifting. I felt, especially when I was in my worst, when I was in the most anxious, I now know that the anxiety was fuel. I was using it to prevent feeling and collapsing into any sort of depression. Because my father growing up, he was an alcoholic again, and just depressed. And so I just had an aversion, not to people who are depressed, but just for myself. And so I use anxiety to fuel myself. So I will keep doing whatever it is I need to do. And that's the energy that I run. And so having tools like this that I can it takes 5 seconds to tap into. It's really not, you don't have to do this whole spiritual, emotional, grounded, whatever. It helps to get centered. But these tools have just been so amazing. Yeah. And like I said, I use them with my daughter, who is a highly sensitive child, and healing her. I can't tell you how important it is to me to help heal her nervous system. Mothers and children are so intertwined. Their nervous systems are so intertwined. And I was a mess when I first had her. And that's no judgment on myself, right? Like that part of me, who I was then, was suffering so deeply. And to be able to have tools now that I can walk it back with her, it's everything. It's everything. I am committed to helping this child heal her nervous system. And let me tell you, there are some negative reactions that she's had to the mix of the household that we were in, not just the mold, but also all of my intensity and my anger and my just anxiety, she has mast cell activation syndrome. She has food sensitivities. She has histamine issues, histamine intolerance, all of these things. And I know through this course and through some other courses that I'm taking around the nervous system that this can be healed. This can be tended to and managed so that she can actually live a life of joy and not be stuck in a fear. It's like her body is still stuck in the fear, even though she's totally seems fine and great. So these tools are just yet again priceless to be able to fix the harms that I did when I didn't know any better. As a mother, it's priceless. There's just nothing better than that.
As we close, I want to highlight what these two women were told, because it's often the message that we have come to believe that holds us back. They were told that their cancer had nothing to do with their lifestyle and emotions. Their doctors had said, go back to life as normal. I can appreciate the intention behind those words as trying to help them not worry, but no, because when our emotions are a part of our biology, and when we have our patterns of protection that are still creating a biology of trauma, let's not go back to life as normal. When our normal is anxiety, when our normal is pushing ourselves because of our inner insecurities and perfectionism, returning to normal is not what to do. And yet, for how many of us is that what we continue to do? In chapter 18 of my book, I talk about the healing journey and how to affect the change that we want in a way that will stick. If this episode resonated with you, you'll want to check out episode 32 on what are the ways the body communicates stored trauma, and episode 74 on why stored trauma becomes syndromes. That was with Dr. Peter Levine. That's a great one. I'm here to save you time and money by bringing you practical information that will help you accelerate the healing journey. Would you please leave a review right now of the podcast? Your feedback helps me bring you great content and helps others find the information that could change their life and perspective as well. I'm your host, Dr. Aimie. Until next episode, lots of love.